The federal government said they're not going to cap energy prices when a free market economy. But how can the federal government at this time, looking at the whole situation, approach and mitigate these effects?
Well, the proposition about capping energy price, because I've heard some people even suggested, that domestically here, that proposition is not something that is feasible within our own context. Because first, that will be taking us back to the regime of subsidy. We don't have the institutional capacity to manage subsidy.
You're welcome to the Economy and Politics Conversation. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. This edition, we're looking at geopolitical shocks and Nigeria's inflation in half-year 2026. With me to have this conversation is Dr. Muda Yusuf. He is the CEO of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise. It's great to have you once again in our studio.
Thank you very much, Otto. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Yes. Let's first begin with the current geopolitical tensions we're seeing in the Middle East, the US, Israel, Iran conflict. How are the impact of the shocks and developments around there affecting economies like Nigeria and other parts of the world?
Well, the conflict is a very unfortunate one. It has caused a lot of disruptions globally. Of course, Nigeria is not an exemption. The major impact points are actually from the perspective of inflation, that the inflation effect of it. And this is resulting from the transmission of the heightened energy costs to the cost of production, cost of logistics. Now, with what has happened, oil price has gone up significantly. Crude oil price, to over $100 per barrel. And that has affected the pump price of petrol, the price of diesel, jet fuel, and gas. And these are critical inputs in any economic activity. Whether we are talking about service sector or production sector or risk sector, whatever sector, energy is key.
Yeah.
And energy is key with respect to first, to logistics, because we are in a country where close to 95% of our movement around, whether you are talking of people, we are talking about cargo or goods, the movements are by road. And so this increase in energy prices has significantly impacted the cost of logistics and the cost of transportation. And this, of course, will feed into the prices of goods, the prices of services, and so on and so forth. So that is one major impact, the inflationary impact of what is happening geopolitically now. Then the other impact, which is also inflationary in a way, is the disruption of supply chains. Now, close to 98% of our imports is by sea. Now, with this development, the closure of the
Strait of
Hormuz and all of that, it has significantly affected the movement of vessels. The risk of movement has increased. Marine insurance has doubled.
Yes.
So because of this, because of this, the cost of import has also increased. So there may be a small a lag before we begin to feel the impact of that. It may not be as immediate as what we are having with PMS price or diesel price or gas prices. But eventually, if this crisis is prolonged, the impact of the shipment cost will also be felt. So these are areas in which this unfortunate development has been affecting the Nigerian economy.
Recently, you published your position, which of course we carried on the ProShare platform, mitigating energy costs, which is very critical at this time. But also looking at the current developments as it affects economies. Some countries like South Korea and Germany, who you naturally feel are free markets, are even looking at capping energy prices. What should be the approach for Nigeria? The federal government said they're not going to cap energy prices when a free market economy. But how can the federal government at this time, looking at the whole situation, approach and mitigate these effects?
Well, the proposition about capping energy price, because I've heard some people even suggested, that domestically here, that proposition is not something that is feasible within our own context. Because first, that will be taking us back to the regime of subsidy. We don't have the institutional capacity to manage subsidy. We just open another window of corruption and all of that. Secondly, the government doesn't have the fiscal space to be able to absorb the additional financial burden of providing subsidy. Because once you cap, that means the government has to subsidize the price of petroleum products. And don't forget, the private sector space is now dominant in the downstream sector of the economy, particularly in the petroleum refinery.
Yes.
And when you are dealing with the private sector environment, you cannot just arbitrarily go and cap. Otherwise, you create all manner of disruption and distortions in the economy. So as to what the government can do, first is for the government to, step up intervention in the provision of electricity. Because if there is adequate supply of electricity, the tendency for businesses, industries, manufacturers to be depending on diesel generator or petrol generator will substantially reduce. So that is one way. I know this cannot happen immediately, but all this intermittent grid collapse, we should find a way to minimize it. That will bring a lot of relief as we speak. The second level is for the government to engage the refining sector, the petroleum refining sector. Look at their cost elements and look at where charges of government are also involved. Maybe taxes, maybe fees, maybe levies, whatever it is. If government can reduce some of those charges and taxes temporarily, that may reduce the cost of operation, of the refineries or whoever is supplying the petroleum products. And if their cost reduces, perhaps they can be encouraged now to reduce the gantry price and all of that. So the other thing that I think can happen, at least to address the challenges of the cost of transportation, is for government at all levels to step up investment in public transportation. For too long, we have left the public transportation space entirely to the private sector, which is why each time you have crisis with energy prices, the impact is felt immediately by the ordinary citizens. So we need to see a lot more impact of government expenditure, government investment in public transportation. If government has bigger capacity in that space, government will be able to moderate the cost of transportation. Even if you want to subsidize, it's easier to subsidize at that level. So now that many of the governments have more revenue, rather than embarking on some very grandiose projects, flyovers, buying SUVs for traditional rulers, these are the kind of things that they should be looking at. Even in the best of times, the public deserves to have public transportation system whose prices or cost is much lower than what the private sector is providing. So these are some of the ways in which I think the government could do something. And for the private sector could also, because this situation requires adjustment, major adjustment, particularly with respect to, energy economics, energy efficiency. For offices that doesn't have to run every day, perhaps they can rationalize the number of days that their workers come to office. They can look at possible use of digital platforms, for people to work from home, remote, just as the kind of thing we had during COVID. That will help to bring down some of these costs. And even those who are in business, you don't have to work for long hours, especially if there is no electricity supply. You can rationalize the number of hours you work and so on. So we need to be very creative at this time because we don't know how long this will last. Because there are no indications that this is going to come to an end very soon. So we should have that plan on how to manage energy costs, cost effectiveness. And of course, we should encourage a lot more people to transit into the use of solar. renewable energy. That is a lot more cost efficient in terms of the running cost. Initial capital may be high, but the running cost extremely cost efficient. And government should also support that process by reducing the fiscal environment. I mean, the taxes, the import duty, and all of that on solar panels, on inverters, on batteries. If the government can take steps immediately to reduce all those taxes, on renewable energy equipment, that will also help. So these are the kind of intervention that can happen both at the level of business and at the level of government.
Yeah, even the presidential villa, they said they're moving to.
The presidential villa is also.
Has to be.
Yes. They have to incentivize more of us to move to follow the example of the villa.
Yes, your points are well noted. The grid, we have a grid asset management intervention project now already by the government, and energy efficiency, particularly public transportation that you said from state governments has to be taken seriously. So let's now look at inflation. It's a major macroeconomic indicator. You've talked about it, that this whole effects will feed into inflation. Currently moderating at 15.06%. With these developments and looking at the fact that major central bank governors across the world, from the Fed chairman to the other leading central bank governors, are being cautious in their monetary policy rates. What's the outlook for Nigeria for the first half of the year, and how would that even play when the next MPC for Nigeria holds in May?
Well, the outlook is not looking so good, because by the time we begin to see the March inflation numbers, all this inflationary effect of this geopolitical crisis will begin to manifest. Because a lot of prices are moving up already as a result of the increase in energy prices. So we are likely to begin to see a reversal of the recent gains in terms of the deceleration in inflation. And even if the war stops today, it will take some time for the effects to fizzle out. So the outlook in the short term is not very good. We are likely to see an uptick in terms of the inflationary pressure, and that may also lead to a situation where the monetary authorities, if they are not tightening, they are likely to put a hold on monetary easing. Because the last MPC we saw a slight reduction in NPR. But with this development, we are not likely to see any kind of reduction. I think the best that could happen going forward will be to hold the rates as they are. But the higher probability is that they are likely to begin to resume the tightening of monetary policy again. And that is what is playing out globally. So that is the kind of outlook that I'm seeing as far as the interest rates, monetary policy response, and all, and even inflation. That's the kind of outlook I'm seeing.
Now let's look at budget 2026. Of course, we're anticipating that it will soon be passed, and then of course the president will sign it into law. That's a very critical fiscal policy tool to really make the economy, reflate the economy, and of course intervene where necessary. What is your outlook in that regard? What should be the priority with this new development coming in place, the whole geopolitics from the Middle East?
Well, the priority will be to rejig the totality of the budgetary process, because the experience you had with the last two budgets is not good at all. In fact, for me, it's even embarrassing that you have a lot of things so muddled up at the federal level. And interestingly, the states are not complaining. They're able to implement projects. They are rolling out projects. They are paying salaries. They don't have issues at the subnational level.
Subnationals.
The major issue is at the federal level. So we need to interrogate what exactly is happening at the federal level, where we are having these challenges with the fiscal position of government, where budgets are not being implemented. So there is a need for a complete overhaul of the budgetary system. And luckily, we have the tax reform and the tax reform chairman is now a minister
Of state.
of state in finance.
Yes.
So I'm sure that will help to properly rejig the system, to ensure that we restore credibility to the budgetary process. Because the way it has been, the budget is losing credibility. Because if you have situations where practically all MDAs come to complain that the releases are just between 10%, 5%, in some cases, no releases at all for capital projects. That is not a budget. And the president also, in fairness to him, when he was addressing the National Assembly during the budget implement, also highlighted that point. That this whole idea of overlapping budgets, non-implementation, has to stop.
Yes.
He was very emphatic, short of even calling out some of the key ministers. So we hope that the next budget will be much better. Now, with the current geopolitical issues, the price of crude oil, that may impact positively on revenue. Although there's also a downside because, first, our output is not doing so well. Second, there's already a lot of forward sales. Third, this is a joint venture. So not all the proceeds is coming to us. So these are some of the limitations. So we need to also manage the expectations as to amount of revenue that can come. But nonetheless, it will impact positively on revenue, So if you have that, I think we should have a much better budget. Having realized that there has been a lot of a credibility crisis as far as the budgetary process is concerned over the last 2 years. And I'm sure the government is determined, to fix that. Which is why I think even the engagement of Taiwo Oyedele to move
as Minister of State Finance,
as Minister, I think it's part of steps, to see what can be done, to normalize the budgetary process. So I'm optimistic that it will be much, much better. And the tax reform is also likely to improve the fiscal environment, the fiscal space, revenue mobilization, and all of that.
Yes. And in just 1 minute as we wrap up, our investment drive. How do you assess our investment drive? Just recently, the president was in UK, received warmly by the King of England. And of course, we saw some interesting conversations on investment prospects. How should we carry on? Because we need to attract investments to also unlock activities in the economy. We need to even attract what we call foreign direct investments.
Yes. We need to do a lot more. What is happening with the UK visit is very good. First, it's good for the optics for Nigeria, for our reputation, given what the kind of tweets that Trump has given, and so all the negative narratives about the country. I mean, this will go a long way, at least, to correct some of those negative perceptions. Secondly, there is a lot of interest that has been shown even during this visit. A lot of MOUs, and even before now, Shell, which is a British company.
The
Bonga project and all of that. I mean, the MD was here very excited, made a commitment of about $20 billion investment in the oil and gas sector. So I'm optimistic that this visit is likely to bring something positive. But again, we must also appeal to our bureaucrats and those who are driving the process to ensure that we translate all these MOUs, engagement, into concrete deliverables in terms of investment. Because that follow-up sometimes is often very weak. So we need to ensure that we get those things translated into concrete outcomes. But it's a good development for us as a country.
A good development, and we hope it translates to real action, attracting more investments, and stabilizing the economy. But very interesting conversation with you, Dr. Muda Yusuf, CEO of Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise. Very interesting insights you shared, particularly the need for government to be proactive in how to intervene in this time, because we don't know how long this geopolitical tension, this war will go. So we need to really look at those issues: public transportation, looking at the energy efficiency, the grid, energy, alternative energy sources. We just need to find a way that citizens are not put under pressure, especially electricity and other concerns. Thank you once again for the time.
Thank you very much.
Very great conversation. Thank you. To our viewers, that we all for this interesting conversation on geopolitical shocks and Nigeria's inflation in half year 2026. I hope you really enjoyed and learned some things as we navigate this period across the global economy and look at the impacts on the domestic economy. This is also to inform you that you can follow this conversation and others that are on the ProShare platform. Follow it on our website displayed on the screen, and also follow the social media platforms also displayed. And just to let you know that on April 16th, 2026, Economic Associates in partnership with ProShare will be hosting the one-day Nigeria Economic Outlook Conference. It promises to be very interesting as we gain insights on the whole developments around the socio-economic space and how this is practicable. And this is very important for corporate leaders, for the private sector, for the federal government, and also for subnationals. So the date is April 16, 2026, and you want to get further insights on this, you log on to our website on ProShare displayed on the screen, www.proshare.co, to get further on this conversation and this conference coming up. Till we come your way again, I remain your anchor, Ottoabasi Abasiekong. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.